So you are called a Brazilian-Bavarian very often. What's your statement to that?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I am half Brazilian, half Bavarian. I mean, I grew up in Bavaria. I was born in Brazil originally, but I grew up in Germany. And my mom and half of the family is German from that area. So, yeah, I grew up in a very small Dorf. How's it called? What's the name in English?
Village.
Like a village, yeah. Klein Ostheim it's called.
Okay.
It's near Aschaffenburg also. It's in the near from Frankfurt. Anyway, but then I moved to Brazil when I was 6 or 7. So I don't know. I don't really consider myself that much of a Bavarian, but it is part of me. So I would say that's a correct statement.
Nice. How did you first got in contact with electronic music or music in general?
Music in general, very early on, through my parents. When I was 8 or 9, I think. 9, I think. I started playing guitar. I played a little bit of drums as well for a while, but didn't really have the coordination to keep that going. And then when I was about 16, I think, I started. Well, the scene in Brazil was growing a lot, especially with like private parties they would call, but they were just an alternative to the big rave parties, like 5K, 8K people, alternatives to that. So we were just throwing, I don't know, 800, 900 people parties, and I just started going to those, having a really good time, meeting some people. I was still underaged at the time, so I could only go to the legal ones. And I don't really remember how it started, to be honest. I just met someone who was playing, and then I love learning new stuff, and I'm just very curious in general. So I was like, oh, this is cool. And then the idea of starting to play started. And then I learned how to play and basically how to DJ. And then shortly after that, I was like, okay, but where does the music come from that I'm playing? And then that's kind of how it started. And I kind of got into that.
So first you started playing in Brazil as a DJ?
Yeah, psytrance DJ.
Psytrance DJ, nice. That is interesting.
Yes. First, I'm not going to say the name, you guys can look it up, but I have, actually, there's music is still out there. I couldn't put it all down. Some of them I could take down, some of them are still out there with my old project names, and if you're keen enough, you can actually find them.
Okay, so is Alex Stein like, how to say? How many names have you had before Alex Stein?
Aliases.
Yeah, that's one.
3, I think.
3?
Yeah, I was Alex T when I started DJing as a Psytrance DJ, and then after that I have my Psytrance project, which again I'm not going to name, but you guys can look it up.
I thought
it's still out there. I actually forgot my SoundCloud password, so my profile from like 12 years ago is still online there. You can see I look like a kid. It says like Amsterdam, Alex Stein, 22 years old, blah, blah. Such a kid. But anyway, it was good times. And after that, I had that project, and then I kind of was just making music as actually 4. I made music as Stein a little bit, minimal techno as well. And then when I moved back to Brazil, I was just like, okay, no one can say that name here. And then I had to make it easier, so Alex came before, and then whoever couldn't say Stein, or because Brazilians don't get the concept of EI, it sounds like AI, that's how Alex Stein came to be then. The name.
Nice. You're still playing Psytrance sets?
No, not anymore. It's been a while. I still enjoy it. I mean, I have love for it. It's been a huge part of my life. That's how I met some of my greatest friends, even Victor as well. We met DJing at a Psytrance party. He also was a Psytrance DJ and producer. Both of us were, and that's how we met. But I don't really. I have a moment or so once in a while where I listen to it and I enjoy it, just thinking back to the time. But it's not really my thing anymore. It's too much. It's too busy. There's too much going on.
And what is the big difference between Brazil and Germany? The country, the culture, the music culture.
Well, everything, man.
Everything.
It's such a broad. It's not such a broad subject. I mean, the scene is completely different. Just the way people. It's completely. Oh man, we can go for hours there. It's completely different. Just the way. I mean, Brazil was colonized and everything. It's just there's such a different mentality there. I can't even begin, honestly. But in terms of the scene, a lot changes. Brazil has its own little ecosystem when it comes to music, and it does sometimes follow the trend. Most of the times not. And yeah, they kind of, when they love something, they really do love it, and then they can just kind of toss it away the next day, and then something cooler comes along, and then everyone's like, oh no, what you're listening to is like, no, everyone listens to that. I listen to something cooler because no one knows about it. And then this is kind of how the cycle, repeats itself. I've seen it happen. Like people love techno, they hate techno. Then they love techno, and then they hate techno. And it just goes on.
When you started DJing and then you kept on going into producing, how did you realize that how did people come on your profile? How because now you release on big labels, Fifth and SL, Terminal M, and so on. How did this whole cycle start for you?
Yeah, that's a thing as well. It's really hard to measure those things. Sometimes I gotta stop and look back to realize how much I've done, because it's like one of those things, your standards grow with you. So you kind of say, okay, I'm gonna be super happy when I do this or release on that label. Then you do it, and 2 weeks after you're like, okay, what else can I do? You know what I mean? And so it fades away really quickly. So I try not to focus on those things as goals in themselves. They're just part of the journey. But it's for me, it's been just the typical cliche, hard work and just being insistent, not giving up. I've taken a lot of no's. I still do to this day with labels. It never really changes, guys. It only becomes more complicated, to be honest. And because you expect more of yourself, the label does as well, etc. It doesn't really get easier. It gets easier in the things that you're struggling as an upcoming artist, but then other things come in. It's just the cycle never really ends. But really, it's been, I started releasing on, let's say, bigger labels maybe 4 or 5 years ago, on Senso and this and that. I worked towards that for a long time. I was working, sending demos, getting no's and no's and no's, and eventually kind of clicked, and then one thing leads to another, and it was very organic with me, very natural. I wasn't really, crazy about it. I was just, even with Terminal M, I met Monica, then I saw at the airport, hi, I'm so-and-so, can I send you music? And then I got a bunch of no's, and then eventually I got a yes, and then that's how it happens usually.
So you traveled a lot.
Yeah, not right now, but usually.
Usually that's what I was leading to. What are you doing right now?
Well, doing a lot of music, a lot of new music. Teaching has been a really great thing for me in the last few months. Since June, I've basically been giving classes every day. It's been crazy.
Like online classes?
Like every day of the week. Like literally I had maybe a couple of days off. Now I'm going to take some time off in November because I got to finish my own stuff, etc. But it's been super great. It's been keeping me busy. I've been getting to meet new people almost as I would if I would be on the road, just meeting people, etc. So that's cool. Keeps things fresh and dynamic, and it even is cool because I can revisit old projects and even remember stuff that I have forgotten about. Like it's cool for me to open a project from 2 years ago and it's like, oh, I even see something that I did 2 years ago and I couldn't even remember about it because it's just like an old trick or something. And you're like, oh, that's actually super cool. I should do that more often. So it's a cool experience.
So did you? Do you think you got better in producing while teaching? When you teach,
for sure.
you repeat.
Yeah, no, I'm always, that's the thing. Like I said, I love learning, so I'm never really happy. Like the tracks that I did in March, I think they're crap, as opposed to the ones I started last week. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so I'm very picky with my own music, but definitely teaching, again, it just refreshes your knowledge. I'm bypassing it on to other people. I'm basically repeating it to myself again. You know what I mean? So it definitely... it was weird seeing that stuff that is natural for me, I don't really think about in my process, of making music. It just it is there because I've done it so many times.
Okay, yeah.
But when I'm speaking those things out loud, I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize I did that. It's just because it becomes this, norm.
Natural.
Yeah. Train it so many hours that eventually it kind of just happens.
How would you describe your music?
Oh, I hate that question.
You can also say past.
No, I'm just kidding. No, not in a bad way. It's just like, how can you describe your own music? I don't know, I guess other people should do that for me.
Yeah, often artists have their own take on their music because they always get so influenced by the people who say, you do this kind of music, and you get put into a category, and sometimes it happens that artists say, no, but I'm that and I feel that, and maybe if it's not the case, then
I don't feel. I like peak time That's like that's the energy I like. When I'm in the studio, that's what I'm thinking. You know, that's the kind of music that really drives me. You know, the big stuff, the big emotions, big moments. Not all the time. You know, I have more chill tracks. I like doing melodic stuff as well. But the usual, that's what I would say. But I mean, I bet there's going to be someone out there who's going to say that if I say that I do techno, they're going to say that's not techno. So I mean, it's always going to be a back and forth. You know, that's why I also try not to put labels on it. As long as people are dancing and are having a good time, I'm good.
So since you're a lot in the studio, what do you use most? Like, which synthesizer is your favorite right now, or in general?
Good question as well. I mean, since I moved from Brazil to Berlin last year, I had to sell everything, all of my stuff, all my studio, like everything I had in Brazil, which was, well, it wasn't bad. It's a renewal, but you know, especially my hardware synths kind of broke my heart to sell those. But right now I'm working only in the box, basically in my new studio here. I haven't really had time to really buy any good stuff. I mean, not good stuff. Everything is good, but you know, I like hardware gear, not because it's analog or it sounds so much better than no. It's just because it brings me outside of my computer. I'm not looking at the screen anymore, and I'm not looking at little colored blocks and trying to make that work. I'm just flowing with the music instead of, this is something that I do a lot, is bring myself out of the matrix, because otherwise everything is too predictable. You're biased. You're seeing that a hi-hat is going to come in. You're not feeling it so much as you're just progressing with the timeline bar. You're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, now that comes in. But sometimes, you know, get out of that is nice. So that's what I miss about like having gear in the studio. So you turn away from the computer and just go somewhere else, and your mind goes somewhere else as well, which is cool.
So now, rough times. What was a wish that you have, like a big wish right now?
Good question. I don't know if I can be selfish. I wish I could go see my family, which is in Brazil, and my parents and my dog and everyone else. As a general wish, I wish the whole thing is over and we can go back to partying, honestly.
That's
sucks.
True. Yeah, it sucks. Yeah. But meanwhile, we are all stuck in the studio and producing, and I would say that you show us how to do that.
Sure, let's do it.
Let's do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Nice.
No,
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Alles gut? Super. Okay, let's get started then. Well, hi everyone again. I mean, of course, we're not in a treated room, so I'm not going to really try to teach you about how to cue a kick and bass or something like that. It wouldn't really make sense in my mind. You know, it's kind of hard to do it here. It's already hard to do it in a normal studio. So this track, I just brought it as an example. Some of you may know it. It's called Speed of Light. It was released this year in Terminal M. And again, it's just kind of here as an example. I will first talk a bit before I dive into the track. Having, as I said, given a lot of classes in the last 4 months, and over 40 people, I think, it's something became super apparent to me that a lot of people get stuck really easily and they don't really have a plan for making music. They're just like very esoteric about it, like let's make music, and then they sit down and imagine and wait for ideas to come. And I mean, at least in my experience, not really how it works, or not ideally. And I see that a lot of people just tend to kind of run in circles, just, you know, they feel like they're not really making progress. And that can be for a number of reasons. And I've seen that more often than not, the culprit, let's say, was workflow in itself and just the lack of a plan, to be honest, to follow. And I think that that is something that is super important and will not only help you make music faster, which then in turn will make you learn faster, and which then in turn will make you get more experience faster, which then in turn will make you a better producer in less time. And yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about a few concepts here that I use, or that I have been using for the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, more often than not, and that have helped me, and hopefully that will help others too. So, when we're talking about workflow, all this stuff, I have some stuff written down because otherwise I wouldn't remember all of it. But as I said, I see a lot of people kind of, okay, they start this kick and bass idea, then they do like a couple of hi-hats, and then they just kind of sit there and listen to that loop for hours. And they don't really, again, have a plan. And for me, music has become from a hobby or something that I really love. It is still something that I love and I enjoy doing, and I would still do it for free, but it has become a business, it has become my job. And this means that I have to get work done. I can't just sit in the studio and be listening to an 8-bar loop for 8 hours. So what has helped me there is to create a plan. And I see music in the same way you could say you see a recipe of a certain food you like. You might know a lot of people like onions and Nutella, but they don't necessarily eat them together. Maybe one after the other, as you know, but I mean, it makes no sense. And I see tracks in the same way, that each track kind of has its own little recipes, things that it may need, things it doesn't need, things that fit the track and things that don't really fit the track. You know, like, you know, I see people just kind of not having a plan. It's like you're cooking a dish and you're just looking around your house trying to find stuff to throw in there. It makes no sense at all. And the same thing goes for music. And okay, how do you learn the recipe? Well, if you're a guy who wants to learn how to make bread, then what you do, you don't reinvent bread. You'll learn how to make bread how other people have made it first. You get better at that. You understand how the process works, what goes into making that bread, why does it stay half an hour in the oven, and so on. Same thing goes for music. Study other people's music. You know, there's no way, I mean, there's no reason for you to be just running around your own tail and trying to find a solution if other people have done that for you. I'm just being practical here. It's not about copying other artists, it's just learning stuff from other people who have learned it before you. Get better at that, and then you can reinvent it and make it your own and whatever you may like. And again, this just goes back to the idea of having a plan. So what I started doing, I don't really do this anymore, but what I started doing back then, which helped me a lot, was literally dissecting other people's music, my references, you know, people that I liked, even colleagues of mine, or just, you know, general tracks that I think were cool. And I would literally sit down with a notepad and listen to that thing for an hour and really study it and write down everything I could listen in that track, everything that I could listen happening, all the different elements that were used, let's say the different ingredients that I could distinguish. So it would start slowly over time making more sense, and my brain would start finding patterns in music. So, okay, these rolling tracks, they don't really maybe have such a theme, a big synth or something. They're more focused on the groove or this and that. It's really basic stuff, but the more you do it, the better you get at it. And again, like we were saying in the interview, eventually you will get to the place where it's absolutely automatic, and you basically just sit down and you kind of have an idea of what you want to do. And then you just have this database in your head already. So you've done it. You've done 50 tracks that are melodic, 50 tracks that are banging, blah, blah, blah. So you kind of just, again, have this pattern in your head so you can start somewhere. So what happens there is that once you start working like this, maybe it won't be absolutely immediate, that you will feel the difference, but it's a training thing. And over time, you'll see that it just becomes easier and easier. And this really goes down to everything, every single element. You know, depending on the track I'm doing, I know which kind of hi-hats I should use, what kind of sound really goes with it, what kind of sound doesn't go with that. You know, I can instantly listen in and say, okay, a ride would really go good there, or it wouldn't, or maybe I do have space for something else. Again, you just get better at recognizing the patterns, the recipes, let's say, and you start then writing your own. And again, then you're going to get better at that. So, when it comes to then building up a track, as I say, usually for me, the easiest process, I can't really always say what I'm going to do before I do it, in terms of I don't sit down in the studio and I know what I'm going to do. Sometimes I am. Most often, actually, than not, I am, because a lot of my ideas come from other people's ideas as well. You know, I listen to a lot of music every day to get inspired as well. I try to go on a run every day, so I'm not listening to the music in my studio. Like I said before, I'm listening in a different setting. I'm not trying to analyze the music in that sense. I'm just trying to flow with it and try to just, you know, see what I think is cool. And there's a bunch of tracks of mine that literally the idea came from me listening to a set or from a track from someone else. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I wonder how he did that or how she did that. And then I would go home and I would figure that out. And once I had, I was like, okay, cool, now I know how it's done, and now let me change this and make this into something new. Just the process of actually trying to figure something out already creates something new by itself, because it's just you doing it with different synths, and there's 1,000 ways of doing the same thing in music, which is one of the cool things about it as well. I meet producers and we sit in the studio, and in the end we have the same thing but different techniques to do it. Which again, you're gonna just develop your own, and this is gonna be part of your sound signature, let's say. You know, I don't consider myself to have a sound signature, like a sound that is me, that I use all the time. I think it's the way I make my music that most people recognize, or I don't know, the drive. Again, it's really hard to say when you're looking from the inside out, you know, from the outside in it's easier, but I can't really say for my own music. So when I'm starting a track, again, it's all about being very specific. Everything that is in a track has a reason to be there, as the same way it would when you're cooking something. You don't just throw random things in your pan. You shouldn't do that to your tracks. I see a lot of people just like, again, you go back to that 8-bar loop, or maybe you have an arrangement and you're not super sure, and then you're like, I wonder what this needs. And then maybe it already has a big synth that lives around the 300 hertz area, or 300 to 500 or whatever, and then you find another sound that sounds cool but lives in that same area, and then you're like, okay, that sounds cool too, maybe I should use both. No, I mean, you can, it's probably gonna sound muddy, and you know, too much information is usually also not good. So it's again about its choices, you know, it's making compromises as well, and it's being practical. Not, I mean, music is, don't get me wrong, it's something very emotional, and it is to me as well, but there's times to be emotional and there's times to be efficient in my eyes. You know, when I'm arranging, or when I'm just starting a new idea, for me it isn't really the moment to really get, wow, super crazy. I can if I want to, if I have the time, sure, then I will do some experiments and stuff like that. I've done it in the past, but when I'm in my studio time and I'm working and I want to get stuff done, I'm not really, oh my God, looking for inspiration somewhere else. Inspiration usually comes to me after a couple of hours in the studio, which is another thing. I was actually going to say this later, but since I'm already on it, I think it's important for everyone to find ways to get busy in the studio without necessarily being creative. What I mean is, I've had a lot of students who are like, yeah, I would open Ableton or Logic or whatever it is, and then I would sit down, listen to the loop, and then nothing would come, and then I would leave again. I was like, okay, how long were you in there? Yeah, 40 minutes. I was like, ugh. Well, you know, getting in the studio, listening to a loop for 40 minutes and waiting for something to happen and then it not happening, well, that's kind of how it works, you know. I mean, I'm a firm believer that I've never had a eureka moment where I was on the toilet and I was like, wow, that synth line that just came to my mind. It never really happened, at least with me. May have happened with other people, not to me. Those ideas come in well into the studio session, you know, sometimes even after hours where you shut parts of your brain out, so you're not worried about what other people will think if you do that or this line, or maybe that's too cheesy, and honestly it's like 4 a.m. and you don't give a crap anymore, so why not do it? So I think that staying objective is very important, and when I'm writing my melodies, when it's the moment of being emotional, then yeah, sure, why not, let's be emotional. But all the rest is just yeah, ones and zeros in the end, guys. It's music, but it's a computer music, you know. It's like it's little blocks and it's information, and yes, you can make beautiful things with it, but it's not as romantic as it may was in the past. I at least don't see it that way. So being efficient at what you're doing will, again, like I said, make you make music faster, which will in turn just let you chew through hours of work faster, because I also am a firm believer, and this is something I've told my friends, people that tell me, yeah, I really want to get into music making. I said, just start. Just start, because the longer you wait, the longer it's going to take, because I could give you all my, you can have the best studio, the best mentoring, everything. It does not matter. It's like flying a plane. You got to have, flight hours. It's just seat time, because you got to chew through all the, don't get me wrong, shitty ideas, and all the basic, very obvious ideas that you are going to have to chew through as a beginner, as a beginning musician, and you're like, oh, that's cool, wow, sidechain, holy shit, that's awesome. And then all these little things that in the beginning are maybe super impressive, and in the end aren't really, because that's just how things work with music. You gotta chew yourself through all the stuff before, and the sooner you start, and the sooner you put in the work, the sooner that's going to happen. And this also means that not every track has to be an absolute #1 hit. You guys have no idea. I mean, for the amount of tracks that you see released from your favorite producers, I can guarantee you there's at least double that's never going to leave the computer. And it's stuff that they've done that they're not happy with, but it is something that has brought them to where they are now, because they had to basically chew through those ideas to get to the ideas that they have now. And this is also, learning how to let go of a track, of a certain idea, is to me just as important as well. I mean, it's not a bad thing if you finish a track and it's shitty. I have a bunch of them. Good example, my good friend Weber, he released an album this year. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, 12 tracks. And I think that he told me that for those 12 tracks, he did, I think, 44 tracks last year or something like that, to then choose 12 to release. And even though I know him for a long time, he won't let me listen to the other 32 or whatever it is, you know. He won't show it to me or Victor or anyone else. No one knows, maybe Anna. But, you know, that's it. And for him, that's okay. And I can just imagine him being as good as he is, the amount of good music that must be on that hard drive that I would love to play, but it's never going to be released, and that's fine. And he's just one of those guys. He firmly believes in that as well. And I think I've given classes to people who are like yes, it's an artwork. I had a girl who was like, yeah, but these are my pieces of art. So she's working on a month on one piece of music and just kind of completely lost the overview there. And I like, yeah, sure it is, but I bet Picasso also probably had a couple of canvas that were just some black stuff drawn, and it was like, yeah, this is crap. It doesn't mean that, you know, it's not there. You gotta do shitty stuff so you can know what you don't want to do as well. It's just as much as a learning thing as it is doing something good. If you do something and it turns out to be shit, then you'll know it's half of the way there, because you know what you don't like, and then that kind of technique or that kind of sound or the way that kind of arrangement does not work for your music. So, I mean, I see it as a win either way. Which means that, for example, I give myself also, one thing that I do is I give myself time limits for things I'm working on. This is not something I recommend to everyone. It's something that you got to test out and see how you feel. There's people that work in a certain way. There's people that work in another way. I am pretty hyperactive, so I work fast. And I kind of give myself a 10-15 minute limit on working on something, which means that if I'm working over 10-15 minutes on one sound or one pattern or one MIDI or whatever it is, I mute it and I go to something else. Because for me, after 5-10 minutes, I lost the overview, I lost the idea. And again, it's very risky to then kind of go into that rabbit hole, and that can bring so many shitty things. Because again, you lose the overview of the track, you just focus on one little thing, and the more you focus on that, less you lose touch with the whole story of the track, and the less it's gonna feel like part of it. And then in the end, you're gonna have a MIDI thing or whatever that you worked for 2 hours, and then you have that situation where you know it's shit, but you don't wanna trash it because you've worked on it for 2 hours. I've been there, we all have been there. And then you're like, you know, deep down you know it's shit, but you're like, oh man, I've put so much work into this, no, I'm not trashing this. And this is something you also got to learn to do, because you've got to set high standards, you know. And again, to get clean mixes or to get something that is you know, sounds nice and full, but there's not so much happening, you got to be very careful about the sounds you choose, and how you use them as well, how you EQ them, and where they're really living in your frequency range, which is just as important. Again, I'm going to keep going back to food because everyone eats, and it's easy for everyone to remember the analogies with food. Same thing as doing a recipe, you know. So, any questions so far about anything I've said? I've just been ranting over here, but no one has said anything. All good? You?
So this regarding...
Oh yeah, maybe there's a mic.
This regarding working with time restraints.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that in practice? Do you like have a timer, or do you sit and look at because I mean that could kind of kill the creativity, I guess, looking at the time.
No, but yeah, I know what you mean, but the whole point is to not kill the creativity, because what I think kills it is when you start with a good idea and then you just kind of get lost and lost and lost and lost, and then after 2 hours your energy is gone because you realize you just wasted 2 hours. So to me, it is important to keep the creative energy going. This means that if I feel I'm not making progress on something after 10 minutes, I will go to something else. So I can free myself from that energy that I'm putting into that and just start to create something else somewhere else. And this is also what I mean with, I started this thing and I didn't finish. It's when I'm starting my studio sessions, usually I just give myself boring work. So I don't really have to be creative in the first minutes. Maybe I'm just organizing samples, organizing projects. I'm pre-selecting samples that I like, or I'm exporting, recycling stuff from my old projects. But when it comes to that, I will just look at the clock. Like I have this gut feeling already when I know that I'm working too long on something. but I will literally just look on the clock. It's not like, okay, I've started right now, but let's say I will work on a synth, and then I know that it's been at least 5 minutes that I've been working there, and then I would look on the clock and maybe give me another 10. If I'm not 100% sure that I'm closer to where I want to be after 10 minutes, it's not that I'm going to give up. That's not the point. I want to keep myself from just going into that production rabbit hole where, again, when you look again, it's been an hour and you lost that. So it's just, again, this doesn't maybe work for everyone. It really depends on what your workflow is. For me, that I have a bit more hectic kind of workflow and everything is really structured, it works because, again, for me, it keeps me from losing time and just going into this crazy creativity rabbit hole and yeah, keeping myself fresh. Always just kind of, okay, this hasn't worked, jump to the next thing. That doesn't work, jump to the next thing, and just kind of, do this kind of almost like a cycle, where until you find something where your creativity connects to what you're doing right now. I'm trying to give myself, Alex, the best chances of doing something good. So this is also important, I'm trying to get the right set and setting for me to be able to do my job properly. And I know that for me it takes a while, because I've done this for a while, it takes a while for me to get running. Like sometimes in the morning I will have really great ideas in the first few minutes, but I'm not really a big fan of producing in the morning. I really like to work in the afternoon, so usually what I will do is just kind of warm myself up to it, and without really just sitting down and expecting magic to happen, because the more you do that, the less it happens as well. Pressure is a big enemy of creativity. I know it, but it can be an ally as well, I mean, I've done remixes where I only had a week to deliver them. It was a nightmare, I didn't sleep, but it was a good remix in the end. So you never know. Moving on. I hope that has answered your question. Other stuff that I would recommend everyone to do, since we're already talking about this musical kind of creative rabbit hole thing. I think it's super, super important, and this may sound very basic, but believe me, guys and girls, the basic stuff is the most important. Take breaks in your studio sessions. I know it's cool to be able to say that you've been in the studio for 12 hours, etc., and it's nice, and sometimes it's fun as well, but it's not productive. The longer you're in the studio, the less you have an overview about what you're doing, and the less you're gonna be connected, in my opinion, to the story that you're trying to tell. It's gonna just become more and more technical, and eventually, it will happen, you're gonna mess something up. Because, after 12 hours, your ears you can't trust them anymore. You're biased, and you've heard this same loop for a million times. And the reason why I say take breaks is exactly to take yourself out of that position, because it's you as a producer. You got to think. You got to think the following here. You're making music for other people to play, right, and other people to dance to. So if you're listening to the same loop for 1,000 times, and then it grows on you. It's like kind of that person you don't really like, but then you spend a lot of time with them, and you're like, it has some positive sides, and you can't really do that to music. People have to fall in love with it on the first time, and the more you're listening to your own stuff, the more biased you are, because you're listening to it a lot, and you lose your overview. It's like, is this even good enough? Is it cool? Does it really groove with the rest? I don't know. So I take breaks, and I always try to keep different pieces of music to be working on. This is something that some people like, other people don't. I think it's practical, to have at least a couple of tracks, so that you can jump in between them so you can keep yourself working without having to work on that specific project where you're super stuck right now. And the best way for me to get unstuck is take breaks. It's just not play with the track for a week or so until I actually forget about it. And I can't really sing it in my head anymore. And then when I will listen in, I can guarantee you it's going to be absolutely obvious if it's good or not. The first time, because you're just as a listener would be on the dance floor. You're like, oh, okay, this really works. There's something cool there. Or you're going to be like, no. So, taking breaks and pulling yourself out of your environment. I don't mean take breaks, stay in the studio, look YouTube. No, get out of the studio, get somewhere else, different acoustics, different air, so you can let your ears and your brain breathe a little bit, and you're going to see that does wonders for you. The amount of bad decisions I have avoided just by leaving stuff and then coming back to it, and just being very, let's say, objective and really being like cold about like, okay, this synth really sucks, or maybe this track is not good, or this and that, it has saved me a lot. So I cannot stress this enough. Just also for your ears, man. Just take breaks. It's gonna be better than you. I can guarantee taking 4 breaks over 8 hours is gonna be better than just working 8 hours straight. It's like you're gonna do better stuff just because you're giving yourself the chance to kind of do something else in between. What else? Okay, I've talked about that. Yes, we've talked about that too. Okay, cool. So, when it comes to arrangement of the track itself, this is why I actually brought this track. Maybe it's even not the best example, but still. I think that something else that I see happening a lot is that because people get really, and again, taking breaks would avoid this, because people get super stuck on one part of a track, instead of you having a track that is like one cohesive, cool, big thing that tells one story, a lot of the times it's like different sections. Like I get tracks sometimes from students where I'm literally telling them like, look, you can do 3 tracks out of this one track. You have like 3 different ideas, all very cool, but they don't necessarily go with each other. But what is happening there is that they found something special, but they don't really know how to spread that and how to keep that interesting over 8 minutes, 7 minutes, and that's normal. It is one of the hardest things to do. Still is hard to do for me as well. It takes some practice. And then instead of trying to make that one special thing interesting, either they repeat that same idea over and over the track because it's so cool, and because of the repetition makes it less cool, because it's less special, because it's repeating all the time. Or they just kind of write this part that works, and then they write a different part, which works as well. There's a lot of big producers who work in that sense, where they have an A part and then a B part. But most of the times they know what they're doing, and there is some sort of cohesiveness between the 2 parts, and you can see how the A part goes with the B part. Thomas Schumacher is a great example. He's great at doing like A parts and then a break and then a B part, and everything works together, and it's awesome. And even though it's completely different, you know? So that can work for you if you know what you're doing. But a lot of the times I feel like a lot of the music, and even, you know, if people will allow me, stuff that is selling a lot on Beatport, like a lot anyway. It's the stuff that it is business music, and as I see it, there's no real soul there. It's produced. It almost sounds like it's produced by an AI or something. It's like you know, you figured out how to do 4x4 kicks and this and that, and it's not that complicated. So it works. It will get people dancing, but there isn't really a big story behind it. There isn't really a theme. There isn't a message. And I mean, I'm not trying to be, again, esoteric here, but I think that the big tracks, the great tracks, then they stand out because they have a story behind them. They have something that drives, something that people can take home with them, even if it's just a feeling, how they felt when they were listening to that. If it's a vocal, I mean, you know, Your Mind from Bart and Adam, that's a good example. That vocal sticks. I was at Bart's place. He showed, you know, the basic loop for that track is nothing grandiose. It's a very good, very typical Bart Skills kind of an Adam, you know, bass. But what makes that track special is the setting that they created to make that vocal work, which again is what I want to say here. Once you find something special, the hardest part will be maybe distilling that into something that will be interesting enough to kind of keep people hooked as you're introducing the track, won't be repetitive, so that when the idea finally comes in, people are like, oh, nice, instead of, this again. It's a mixture of all these things. And again, I want to put a lot of emphasis in this, because I know that this is something that a lot of people struggle with, because they don't even think about it in that way. They just kind of, let's go back to food. Food always works. Look, imagine when you're arranging a track, that it's like a 5-course dinner. You know, you're not going to invite your friends and throw a steak at their face as soon as they walk into the door. You know, you want to give them peanuts first, or maybe a beer or whatever. And this is what I'm saying. You know, you want to find that special thing, and then, again, this is going to be the hardest part, and you're going to have to figure this out on your own. Find a way of distilling that and making that work over a longer period of time. And there's so many easy ways of doing that, really easy ways. I will give you an example now. I won't even play this, but literally just a visual example. If we have this track here, Speed of Light, which some of you may know, I have this kind of bass line that I wrote here that is kind of the melody of the track there. And what I did, I mean, you can see this is 3 minutes into the track. This is when you get to hear the actual melody the first time, and this is also when the vocal comes in for the first time. So everything up into this point is basically a big intro to this moment there, right? This isn't the intro. This is an intro to the track. This is a mixing tool, okay? So other people can mix in your track. Then here the tension starts being created, then we have a peak moment there, then we kind of have a little drop, we maintain. But in general, I'm just creating a setting and creating the moods to come in with the break and bring in that whole idea and that whole thing. And the only moment really where you're gonna get the melody, the full-blown energy and everything else is gonna be there. It lasts 30 seconds. That's the highlight of the track, that's it. So I'm not trying to make the track be absolutely massive, oh my God, for 6 minutes. No, I'm playing it safe and smart, and I'm seeing, okay, we have basically a minute intro, a minute outro, which leaves us with what, a 4.5 minute window to make something cool. And then instead of trying to make 4.5 minutes super cool, I will focus on making a setting and creating a mood that for when I do actually make something cool, it makes sense, you know, and it's big, it's epic, because we've been building up to that. You know, I hope I'm making sense here. It's pretty simple, but I see so many cool ideas being wasted because they're just repeated over and over. Like literally start a track, and on the first minute you hear the whole riff that basically is the main thing of the track. You know, da 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 da, and you're like, okay, I hope something else comes later on, and then the break comes, and the thing comes, and the drop comes, and it's the same thing again. And it's like, well, that's a waste, really, because if you and there's so many different easy ways of creating movement and just really, I mean, I'll show you guys here a couple of examples on this track. But you just gotta be creative, and I know this sounds very general, but it's just like not being creative about what you're creating, but being creative about what you're putting in terms of what you're even looking for. And then we go back to the recipe idea. You know, if you basically, after you studied other people's music a lot, and you've written stuff down, and you've made your own tracks, and you failed a bunch of times, it will just become apparent. It will be obvious to you what your track needs, what it doesn't need, and what kind of track you're writing, what kind of elements you need. For example, in this track, I have a big bass line idea, this thing here, which probably you know. Where's the sound? Can you wait? Sorry. Come on, Logic. 1, 2, 3, and go. Okay, there is no sound coming out of this thing. This is awesome. Okay, this happens. Pigments. I hate pigments. I love it, but I hate it. It will just not play audio. This is why I usually bounce my stuff as well, guys. Bounce your stuff, because you know this will happen. It's not playing any audio. I have to restart my Logic now. Awesome. So, just a second, let me restart this. But the idea here is that, and I'm going to show you this in this track. Once I realized I was doing a track that was very busy in terms of information of notes, right? There's this bass line that basically runs through the whole track, doing all that stuff. Like, it would be, like, why would I try to bring in a second or a third or a fourth ARP? You know what I mean? This is, again, you know, if you're making goulash and you already have meat in there, you won't throw another kind of beef in there just because it's laying around. I mean, you can if you want to. Would be weird, kind of, but still. The idea there is to kind of just realize what do I have and what space do I have in my mix, then to kind of work with that. So let's see if maybe now we can listen to the bass line. Yeah? Is it coming out there? Or is this here? Let me try again. Let me see my thing here, my audio. Okay, darum. Steinberg. So. Yeah, I know. Oh God, everything again. Should have just brought my studio computer. Oh. Yes. Okay, thank you. There you go. So, this, I gotta be careful with my, let me turn this louder, because then you can turn that down. Let me see. So, if we look at the bass line that I have here, the kind of melody that I told you guys I wrote, this one. Super simple, arpeggiated, 2 octaves. Only thing I did here was really to kind of change the velocity here. You can see that a couple of notes have different velocities. I did this just to really kind of create a different kind of groove. I completely went random. I like this note, this note. No idea or plan behind it whatsoever. The sound doesn't really sound as the original one, because I actually, instead of overdrive and a compressor here from Logic, I have a Thermionics Coacher Vocher, which is a distortion unit from UAD, and also an API 2500 from UAD. But without those, it would sound weird. So I just added those last minute this morning to kind of, fill in those places. So if we look at this thing, so what I did there, okay, imagine I wrote this. I don't remember what the order was in this track. It's been actually funny story about this track. I wrote this track like 3 years ago, and it was one of those tracks that I didn't know what to do. And I thought it was cool, but there was something missing. I didn't know what. And then I just put it on a hard drive and I forgot about it for a year and a half. And then one of those days, because of my routine of cleaning hard drives when I'm not feeling inspired, I found this and immediately, at the first time I listened to it, I was like, okay, vocal, change of sound, and it's done. And I literally finished the track in maybe 40 minutes or something. And that's this track. I have changed the kick as well because it was an old kick, it was kind of shit. But other than that, the track was done. It just wasn't the time at the time when I did it, the time to do that track. My mind couldn't think of anything to it. But a year and a half later, it was obvious to me that I just needed a vocal and a change of sound. It was kind of a mini Moog sound, not such an FM bass sound. But what I did here is literally I just took the first 2 notes and repeated them all over the track. That's it, really. This is literally just probably a MIDI section that if see? So I'm just doing this, and this is what I mean with, for example, this is such a rice and beans easy way of, getting one idea, then, just getting the initial idea of it. One thing I could have done as well would be to just repeat the first kind of this thing, something like that.
Oh, that's tough.
Oops, sorry, that's the vocal and bow bass. I could have just repeated that for the whole track and just kind of worked upwards in terms of, I don't know, cut off or whatever. But I didn't do it because I thought it would be unnecessary. Honestly, I could get away with less. And this is almost a game to me. How much can I get away with without it getting boring? I honestly have fun with this. I know it's weird, but I do. And I kind of like writing something and then I like, okay, how much can I condense this or make this simple without it getting boring? Like simplify it to the absolute extreme. That's something that Bart Skills does very well, by the way. He's very good at that, and his arrangements are amazing because of this. So again, I had this big thing that is going to become this big bass eventually, there, for example. And what is happening there is that for the first time here, since the whole track started, we're kind of opening up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little change of, this is where this is where you kind of give a little, you're basically telling this is where you tell your guests that you're getting steak for dinner, basically. So they get a little bit, they know what is coming, but they don't really get it yet. So this is what I'm doing there. I'm repeating notes, and then doing a little bit of a variation at the end. I'm gonna go back. And this just naturally feels nice. It feels, the whole cycle just repeats itself, and it brings you back into that first couple of notes again, and then you're just gonna do that for another minute. And this is what I mean with getting away with, like, I can just do this, and after a minute and a half to 2 minutes, and then I can do another whole minute or 45 seconds of the same thing without it getting boring. And because I have so much information, and because all of these notes are so fast, like imagine, where's the space there really to put anything else? The only thing I really can imagine that makes sense there would be something super airy, or something that is like a pad, for example, like this guy. Oops, that's a long note, so we gotta wait until it starts again, and there. Something like this, which is just a kind of guitar paddy thing with a semitone. You see this little, I don't know, I'm not sure if you can see this. Wait, how can I open this? There, these lines, this is just my pitch bend. So I just recorded this. I played a note and I went, meow. That's it. And this just repeats over the whole track, and I'm controlling how much of it is coming into the track and how much is coming out, just to create tension. If I didn't point this out, you probably wouldn't even hear it. And there's a bunch of stuff in my tracks that work that way. They're very important. They're the sideshows to the main theme, but they're really the ones who are actually making the tension. This is a big responsible for the tension in the track. Another one is this air choir, which I did with Alchemy, which is just a native plugin from Logic as well, where I basically draw in the same notes as the bass line, more or less, just with a few little changes because of the sounds. Wait, that's automation. Like this. And this as well, it's kind of just growing. Later on, it's going to go up an octave. And you can see that all these I have my main bass sound. All the other sounds that I have are stacked on top of that in terms of frequency range. I'm not trying to fight the main sound there. I'm not trying to put stuff in it that's going to mess up my mix, or again, it's like all of us are having a nice conversation, but we all wait until the one is finished talking, until the next one can talk. The same way I hate clashes. I hate anything that is kind of where you can't really distinguish sounds and it sounds like one big chunk. I don't like it. So when I'm EQing my stuff, when I'm choosing what octave it is in, even my hi-hats, when I choose my hi-hats, I'm looking at where they're sitting in my frequency range, if I have anything else there, if I have other hi-hats there. If I do, then I don't need another one. And if I do need another one, then the first one is shit, and I should just get rid of that one and get a better one for that same place. So again, it's being practical about it, guys. It's music, yes, but it's like, how much stuff do you really need? Once you've written so much of this down, you only need so much. And music, in the end, trust me, it's pretty simple. Like when it comes down to the elements that you need to make a track danceable or good, it's not easy, but it's simple. And the simple part is the difficult part, really. It's getting the simpleness. A lot of people do the opposite. They tend to make over complex tracks where there's 1,000 different things going on. I did that myself a lot in the past. And even now, listening back to my own tracks, it's like, oh man. But it's part of the process as well. And I'm telling you this not because you're going to go out there and probably do it tomorrow, but at least if you know the concept and you know it's not as complicated as you think, and it's really just a recipe like anything else, you'll get there. Just like a baker is learning how to make bread as well, he'll probably burn a few, and after that, he'll get better at it. And then once he has understood the process and how other people do it, then he can make it his own. And this is the same thing what I did with music, basically. I try to figure out how stuff is done. I get a huge kick out of it, honestly. Again, I can't say how many of my tracks I've started with other people's ideas. I mean, not some, I'm going to steal this. But, I listened to something, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I never actually tried to do that. I wonder how it's done. And I would get home and blah, blah, blah. And just by the process of me redoing it, it becomes something completely different. And I get two things out of it. I get one, I learned something, and I get a kick out of that because I love that. And two, I create something new that I hadn't really done before. And it takes me out of my comfort zone. So again, for me, it's a win-win situation every time I put myself in those shoes. Questions? Any, this far. You? Yeah?
Do you stacking sounds, or do you go with the saturating them to reach the more full spectrum range?
Both, but mostly saturation. I'm not a huge fan of layering. I think it's cool. I've done it in the past. Tracks like Impact Theory, for example, I'm doing a masterclass on that track as well. You guys, it's going to probably come out in December or something. But you maybe see that like the main sound there is like a SH101 sound, really like a sawtooth mono, no reverb, just straight in the middle, bam, just really thick. So that's the thickness of that sound. And then I had a diva sound on top of that, which is then where most of the bass or almost all of the bass is cut out. And then there's reverb, delays, and widening. So when you do that nicely, you can get one big sound. But especially in the beginning, I wouldn't, try it out, try it out. But honestly, I rather, and this is something that I am like this, I would rather spend half an hour to find the right sound to start with than spend half an hour trying to make a sound that I like fit my track. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so it's better to choose a right sounds to start with to make it easier in the mixing and the
Exactly. I mean, that again, it goes back to being very objective, like I have a folder on my desktop, my other desktop, where it's called, I don't know, it's like a weird name, which is, I literally just did like this, and it's like, but it's like, it's there because sometimes I will have samples in tracks that don't really fit this track, but instead of just trashing them, I will throw them in there. So that's, it's like almost like a sandbox for ideas, and this will help you as well. Just keep your good ideas there. And if you do a nice MIDI, but it doesn't fit you, you can say, at least in Logic, you can save this MIDI file, and you can just, I've done this a million times, and just kind of, mix and match, because sometimes the idea that you have right now doesn't match that thing.
Yeah.
And when you are working on something, again, be objective as to like, okay, I have this track, I have a main bass line. Why, waste time looking for other sounds that live in the same area as that bass line? If like once you've made the commitment, this is the sound for this track, then again, it's kind of like almost like a little list. Check, main synth, check. Okay, now we need what? What do I have space for? Pads. Okay, let's do pads. And what I mean space for is in the spectrum.
Yeah.
It's like it's ones and zeros in the end. You only have so many hertz and so many volumes. So many decibels you can fill. And if you want that to sound clean and pristine, you got to be careful about what you're doing in every area.
And how do you know where to stop at saturating something? Like for me, because when I saturate something, if I'm not overdoing it like too much, it's always good to saturate it more. I feel like when I'm saturating something, is because of like decibel, I feel like it's always getting better, but sometimes I'm overdoing it and destroying it. How do you understand?
That's,
like you need to stop.
That's going to be your ears, man. That's going to be a bit of training, and you're going to probably have to mess up a few sounds before you know how far is too far. But that being said, depending on what, I mean, sometimes I have saturation on saturations, actually a lot, you know, because I like how this one does this to the low end and this one does this to something else. But again, in the end, it's just, sometimes I go too far and then I dial it back. So it's going to be training. You're going to have to do a few times too much and a few times too little to kind of find the middle ground and see like, okay, this is where I like
sounds
it.
Then.
Exactly, yeah.
Thank you so much.
But no worries. Any other questions? That was very German. Questions?
Can I see the EQ on the bass?
Sorry?
Can I see the EQ on the bass?
EQ on the bass, yes, absolutely. Well, as I said, usually here there would be a thermionic Cocho Vocer. After that, there's just this. And then there's a compressor, which would be an API, then an LFO tool, and last but not least, I have like a Cambridge EQ, which is from UAD as well, just to be absolutely sure that there's nothing really living under 60. And in this case, I'm cutting here on 65, so really there's a lot bass there. But I mean, this is intentional. This is also why my rumble isn't really that loud or that pronounced at all. And this is also, you can see I'm not cutting like this. There's a lot more bass in there. I'm cutting like that. So the way, this is something I do, Victor does this as well. This is something that isn't really right, but it's just the way, I don't know, I like to work like this. I usually will use a more aggressive curve, which isn't really that ideal because it can cause phase shifting. But at this point in my life, if I hear phase shifting, I will correct it. If I don't hear it, it's not there. I don't care. You know, it's like with time you get a little bit more lazy, let's say, with some things where you just kind of, you can do it because if I can hear it, then it's not bothering me. But usually this would be a normal cut of 72 dB per octave. But again, this leaves a lot of energy there. So one thing that I do, instead of, for example, doing like a dynamic EQ or something, or ducking this, how I would usually do it, I will just put this down in this way, so it will start cutting before, and what I have then is just less bass than this. And what I try to do as well, I'm trying to control energy as much as I'm trying to control volume and frequencies. And energy to me is like the junction of both. Like here, it doesn't really become that much louder, but you can just hear how the speakers are just working more to make it happen. And this is what I mean. But this is something that has come over the years. It's the same thing when I'm terrible to work with for collabs because everything has to be in key. And I'm always like, oh man, that thing is half a semitone out of key. But that's just the way I like to work. And it's because I've gotten accustomed to this over the years. And it's the same thing with EQs. I really just use a little bit of my gut feeling, like when I'm in the studio, what I feel, but how it hurts my ears. Even for my hi-hats, like if I turn it up and something is hurting, something is wrong. You know, resonances, I'm always trying to get rid of resonances. They're a big, big enemy. You know, anything that is, once you add up to other stuff, it's gonna be one big resonance, and that's gonna be hurtful to people listening to your music, or even yourself, or even your speakers. So in terms, there isn't really a rule there. I kind of just use my gut feeling, but yeah, when it comes to EQ and my production in general, I mean, whoever has done classes or whenever I do have my masterclass like videos, you're gonna see it less is more in terms that sometimes, yes, I will have some more processing on one or other sound, but I really try not to go crazy, and EQs for me are more for cutting than boosting. Like very rarely you will see me boosting anything like a bass. I haven't done that in years. You know, I will use something else, a saturation device or something else, or maybe just a better kick in itself. You know, if it's not there, then I'll just start with a different sample. I always try to start with a good building block. You know, you can't. Sorry for the expression, but you can't polish a turd. You know, if it's shit to begin with, it's going to be a better shit in the end. But if it's a good thing and you know what you're doing, then you're going to get something a lot better out of it as well. But yeah, let me check if I've said anything, everything I've written down, if anyone has other questions. Yeah, but that's more or less about it. I just wanted to show you guys really that making music, it can be very esoteric and emotional, etc. But you don't have to be stuck running in circles. If you're stuck, look at other people, see how they have overcome being stuck. It's not wrong to want to learn from other people who have come before you. I don't think there's any shame in that. Like I said, it's not about copying someone and then releasing that as your own. I'm not saying to do that. That's an asshole move. Don't do it. But you know, for me, it would be stupid to not want to, or not enjoy the knowledge that is out there, and just use your favorite artists as a kind of, one, as a reference to where you want to go, and two, even as a reference of how far you've come. You know, I reference myself to this day to other artists and friends of mine. Weber knows this. I will reference my mixes to his, because I think he's a genius when it comes to that stuff. And I will still do it, and I'm still far behind. I can tell you, like I was referencing these days, I was like, oh shit, I have a lot to do still. But you know, it keeps me going as well, and it also shows me that, wow, my release from 2 years ago, that's really terrible actually. I mean, it isn't, but compared to what I'm doing now, so it is a constant evolution. But I'm doing this through just a certain volume of work, which I can accomplish because I'm being just practical. I have a plan when I sit down to make music. I'm not just waiting for creative ideas to come. I help them. I create an environment, a garden where these ideas can actually grow, and not just sit down and, come on brain, do it. It's not, it doesn't, I mean, unless you're a genius or something, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. Not for me at least, and most of the people I know, it's not how it works. And you gotta work for the creativity to come there. It doesn't happen like that. So basically what I want to say is this: make a plan, study other people's music, learn the recipes, you know, learn how to cook these recipes, just even if it's for fun. You don't have to release any of this music. I can tell you every track counts as a learning curve. You know, every track, even if you do something that is completely terrible, it will teach you what not to do. So just, you know, chew your way through all the music you have to chew as an upcoming artist or producer, until you find your own little thing and the sound that really talks to you, and those moments in the studio at 2 a.m. where you're like literally producing standing up because you're too excited to be sitting down. And this is also rare. Hadn't had one of those in a while, and those are great. So it's not as complicated as it seems, guys. Really, music is pretty simple. There's only so many elements that go into a track, and once you start looking at it separately and looking at the bigger picture and what the bigger story is about the track, is going to make a lot more. I mean, everything is going to just make more sense, because you're not going to be just kind of looking or lurking in the dark. You will have a game plan, and even if that game plan is a little mathematical and isn't really musical enough, it will get you an arrangement done. And at least that's more than, you know, just looking around, just going around in an 8-bar bar loop. So yeah.
Do you tune your kicks in Logic?
No, I tune my track to my kicks. Instead of changing the pitch of my kicks and fucking the sample up, I choose a sample that is FGA, you know, one of the good ones, or FGA sharp. And then I have my whole track on top of that. I really avoid messing with pitch shifting in the low end, even with rumbles, etc. That's why I also do my rumbles from my kicks, so that, you know, my kick and rumble are basically the same thing. It's just an extension of each other. They're in the same key. I don't really have problems. I can do a kick and rumble in 2 minutes. You know, once I find the right kick, it's done. The rumble is done as well. It's just a matter of really sitting down and cutting it. And this is even how I've done it here, I think, probably. Oh no, this is something else. This is a high kick. So this is the rumble. And this rumble was made from that kick up there. So it's basically this with no attack, and then stretched a little bit, and then put to the sides. And then this becomes this. And yeah, it's easy. See, I cut everything else. And I'm controlling energy here. If I didn't have this, it's already super bassy in here, but it would be worse. And I don't need much more than that. You know, it's, for me, the rumble is not a main character. It's just there to kind of fill in the space between your kicks. That right there. That's it.
Do you have a place of keys to work? Like sometimes you just think like F sharp and F is better?
Yeah, F sharp, G sharp, and A sharp are usually the better ones. I don't have a favorite. I've worked on E, B, D, like really weird sounds, which sometimes is a pain in the ass, but it's cool as an experiment. But in general, I try to keep, I mean, it's just, that's the thing, I don't really look for, I mean, answering your question as well, I don't really look for a tone. I'm not looking for kicks in F or something. I'm just, when I'm listening to my kicks, the most important thing for me is that the punch is there. You can't, it's really hard to make punch, you know, make punch in the good one, it's really hard to make afterwards, to create that on top of a sample. Making character, like really distorted stuff, you can do that easily with any plugins, or even just layering like I did here, you know, like literally. I'm not sure if you can hear this. Yeah, that's my top kick. And this is just another kick that I, distorted the shit out of with clip distortion, and then just kind of cut out everything else. Added another distortion, which is this one, and then another. So it's EQ on top of EQ. Again, something else that I think a lot of people don't know. If you're saturating stuff, you have to EQ it again. Okay, guys? I mean, the first EQ is just really for you to cut stuff out that you don't want. After you process your whole, whatever it is you're processing, please throw another EQ on there. I'm 90% sure there's going to be low end that you don't know about. And a lot of people get really muddy mixes because of it, especially when you're using, like this guy, Combinat, it's crazy. Because of the algorithms it uses, as soon as you put it on the channel, you literally create like a 20 dB at 20 hertz. Like it's a mountain of low end that I can't even hear it in my studios. That's how low it is. But it's there, and you add that up with other stuff, it's going to be a mess. But yeah, again, I get a lot of questions about low end, etc. And to me, it's spend more time finding the right sound to choose with, to start with, and you have to reference it to other people. What kind of kicks are these people using? I mean, this was a big thing for me when I stopped doing. Well, not stopped, when I transitioned to the more Brazilian electro bass, whatever we did back then, sound, and we used kind of more psytrance-y kicks, which are very short in the beginning, like, and then become like this huge thing, which are usually very soft and nice, but usually a pain in the ass to mix because you don't have a lot of attack and you have a lot of boom, and then you have your rumble, which is another lot, and then just basically it's a lot of boom. And then I remember realizing that when I was like, okay, I'm using the wrong kicks. Like everyone else that I play the tracks, use this kind of kicks, and all the labels where I wish my music was, and all these artists that I wish were playing my music, they play music that use these kind of kicks. So I'm not saying shape yourself, but I'm saying be smart. You can't. If you're hunting, you need a gun. You know what I mean? If you're going for that, and if you're trying with the wrong kind of sound, then it's just. I mean, it's not going to happen. So you got to know where you want to go and then work towards that. Again, you got to have a reference. Otherwise, you're just, flying blind and you're just wasting time in the studio. And not wasting, but again, you could be doing so much more. So, yeah, unless there's any more questions about this track in particular or anything of the stuff that I said, I would say more or less this is it, guys. Yeah. Absolutely, man.
Like when you're mixing, do you choose reference tracks? Like, and have you ever thought like there is no reference track exactly like yours or like this?
For mixing?
Yeah, for mixing, like
for mixing, I don't really use reference tracks. I mean, that's a tricky question, actually. I would use reference tracks, and it's going to be hard for you to find something that is similar to your sound. I would just try to find whatever is closest, and maybe not use that, but use 2 or 3 different references, and then find an average. And what I mean with reference is not even, how high does he put his open hi-hat or this and that. I wouldn't use reference for that. I would use reference for the whole thing. How does the track sound? Does my track sound as brilliant? Does it have the same shine as this one or not? Because in the end, I don't really use other people's reference, never really used for volume. This is something that I always prefer to do myself, and how I do it is just I will solo my kick, and then I will literally from the top down solo each and every one of my individual channels, and then do the volume on each of them as I go adding them on. But the kick is the guy who's in charge. So from him down, basically. And that's how I do my mix downs. I mean, there isn't really a mix down. When I'm done with the track, it's done. I mix and I EQ as I produce, which is great as well because, I, for example, have a gig later on at Ritter Butzka, can just literally throw a limiter on this and go play it. No problem. I don't have to send it to someone to mix down and then send it to someone to do this. No, it's done. I don't have to sit down and export this to another project. I know a lot of people who do mix downs, like exporting everything and then doing. I think it's cool, but I think it's, in my opinion, an unnecessary step. Because if you then decide you have to change something, you got to go to 2 projects back, and then go another project forward, so then you can test it again. It's like, why would you waste that time? So again, being practical helps. As well as, for DJing, just to be, I've had situations where, thank God, my music was 95% done and I didn't have to mix it down and I had to send a demo. And it was like, okay, the track is, Monica was like that. She was like, okay, I'm playing today, can you send me music? If I hadn't done the mix down, I wouldn't have sent music. I did, she played and it rocked and I got a release. So, be ready as well. Being practical, so you have to be ready for when opportunities come. Otherwise, again, you're just wasting time. So yeah, I hope this was informative, and if anyone has any other questions, you can also, if you don't want to ask here, you can ask me in private, that's fine, I'm going to be here for a little longer. If not, again, I hope this was informative and it has helped you in any form or way or shape of whatever. And if not, feel free to hit me up on Instagram, or slide into the DMs and send me a message. I will be happy to answer there as well, or just send me an email. People who know me know I'm pretty keen. I love on sharing knowledge, and it's something I get a kick out of as well. So yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you so much.